Working with family or friends can be a dream or a disaster. What starts with trust and good intentions can quickly turn into tension, confusion, or resentment if the boundaries aren't clear. Did you know 70% of family businesses fail before it gets to the second generation? And often that's because of relationships. And it isn't necessarily because of the older generation not being able to let go. Hi, I'm Kathy Doherty, the People Navigator, and I help small business owners like you lead well with less stress. And in this series, I'm focusing on answering questions that I have been asked through my 20-odd years in the HR people culture space, as well as nearly 3 decades plus a childhood in business. Today, we're talking about how to manage those personal relationships inside your business without ruining them. And if you work with family and friends, this video is for you. We'll look at how to set healthy boundaries, keep things professional, and avoid those awkward, unspoken tensions that can creep in and possibly ruin the next family get-together. Watch to the end for a key consideration, which is possibly the biggest. Before we get started, think, would you hire that person if they weren't family or a friend? If the answer is no, you might want to pause and really think about it. And this can be easier said than done, especially if you're facing pressure, either from that friendship, other relationships, or potentially other people in the family who look at you and go, you've got a business, there's this person needing a job, you hire them. If you do decide to bring family or friends into your business, make sure that you define the role and not the relationship. Put it in writing, the same as you would with any other employee. It might be tempting to keep it a bit more relaxed, to show a bit more flexibility, that, oh, well, we know each other, I know, I trust you. You're not going to do anything. You'll be fine. We've got a good relationship. We will be able to work together. Stop right there. When you bring somebody into your business as an employee, in most jurisdictions in the world, they will have more legal rights than that family or friend who wasn't an employee. And that then puts more obligations on you as their employer. So formalize it. It's a formal relationship in the legal perspective, so make sure you reflect that when it comes to the practical application. And you might find there's a bit of pushback that, oh, we don't need that formalized, sure, we get on. No. This is your business. There are consequences to bringing somebody into your business, so make sure you have it in writing, the same as you would with any other employee. No special clauses, no special terms. They are the same as any other employee that you hire into your business. I have seen it so many times where the successful part of the family has a business they have started from scratch. Other relations think, well, so-and-so could do with some experience, or they've been made redundant here, so-and-so will hire them because they're family. That's a really nice gesture, but it's still a legally recognized relationship with loads more legislation behind them in most jurisdictions. Don't keep it casual, because it's not, and it never will be. Also, by setting that tone, you're making it very clear this is business. Be specific and crystal clear about what their role is, your expectations of them, and also any authority they do or do not have. And my emphasis is on the do not have, because what you can find is if you aren't crystal clear, they will, and it isn't necessarily the individual, but other people who aren't your family and friends, who are your employees, things can get muddied. There can be a perception, and I'll cover that in a few minutes, but be crystal clear on what their remit is, who they report to. If they're not reporting to you, they're reporting to somebody else, make sure they don't bypass that person to come straight to you, because then that's going to cause an awful lot more problems between you and that employee you wanted them to report to, but also how that impacts on the rest of the business. And it is amazing how bringing one family member or friend into the business can impact on everybody else in the business if you are not only crystal clear at the beginning, but in day to day, that you remember and reinforce that they are the same as everybody else. And I know I worked with my dad, and we'll talk about that a bit later. When you are communicating with this friend or family member, you are communicating as the boss, not their sibling, not their cousin, not their aunt or uncle. You are the boss, and therefore you need to communicate exactly the same way as you would with everybody else on your team. No special privileges, no access to more information than anybody else would have. In the workplace, in that relationship, they need that clarity. They need to understand where the boundaries are. So they will rely on you to do that. And if there's pushback, we'll cover that a bit later on as well. Be very careful to avoid any of your private chats, any of your knowing glances, any of your own shorthand, especially if it's a family member that you are close to and we all develop our own shorthand communication when we're talking to family members that we spend a lot of time with. Be very careful of that in the workplace, because that can affect your other relationships in the workplace where people feel excluded. It's like using jargon to people who don't understand what the jargon is. So if they're not in the loop, in that special circle, they can feel excluded, and that can then lead to people going, well, look at how they're treating them, and I don't really like this. I'm not being given the respect that I deserve, that I had before this person came in. And then all of a sudden they're in the loop and I'm excluded. It can get very messy, and sometimes it is just perception rather than reality, but it all comes down to you as the business owner, as the leader of your business. Make sure you hold exactly the same style of check-ins, catch-ups, reviews, whatever you have with other people in your team, exactly the same type. No special treatment. In team meetings, if they are part of the team meetings, they don't get any extra airtime than anybody else. They're not treated any differently, and you may find, and it depends on the relationship, that's when this can get very, very difficult, but it's possible, it's doable. And leading on to my next point, watch for perceptions of favoritism. Even if you are being fair, other team members may feel like you are favoring that other individual. And look, we all understand when there is a family relationship. We all know, and being upfront about it, that this is my relationship, this is how we are connected. But when it comes to the actual application of what you do day in, day out, making sure they do not get special treatment. Because what can happen when you bring your family or friend into the business? The ideal is that they realize that this is a position of privilege, that actually they need to work twice as hard to justify them having got that position. Because that is the reality and that is the perception. When you bring somebody in, you need that person to be aware that that is how they are perceived by everybody else. Because it will be a case of you only got the job because of your relationship, the whole nepotism thing. So that individual, and this is your hope, that they are aware, and this all comes down to your communication as well. Do not beat around the bush with this. Make it quite clear that they are going to have to work twice as hard, especially in those first few months, to justify them having got the role versus somebody else. Where people don't realize that and they take it, well, I'm related to the boss, so what I say, they'll always listen more to me than they will to you because you're just an employee, whereas I'm their brother, sister, child, cousin, whatever that is. That's a nightmare in creation for you, and you do not want that. So make sure how you deal with somebody. So whether it be mindful that when you're talking, when you're giving feedback, you do it in exactly the same way. You don't maybe give them extra feedback in private when you would normally have done that in public with somebody else. That you can still be kind, compassionate, sensitive as you would to somebody else with their level of experience. But this is where it all comes down to you leading and being quite clear that they are treated exactly the same way. It's very likely that depending on that relationship, they may well be privy to more information than another employee would. And this is where you are trusting them to behave professionally and to not create problems for you. And that is where you setting those boundaries, setting those parameters parameters is really important, because you don't want that individual to abuse that trust, that privileged position that they are in, that maybe they are your child and you go home and you're discussing things around the kitchen table. Be very, very careful and cautious about what you're discussing, but also what they're allowed to share, what they're allowed to let people know that they're aware of. And this is where knowing the nature of the person you're bringing in will really matter. How much do you give them access to? And how much do you actually need to change what you do outside of work or when you're discussing things? You need to be able to trust that person, that they will not abuse the privilege they have of being connected to you more than just the employer-employee relationship. And how favouritism can manifest itself is maybe increased flexibility. So you might be more lenient in terms of the time they arrive or the time that they leave, that you might be more flexible in terms of any appointments they need to get to, or if you require people to give you so much notice to get time off, that you're more flexible with them because you kind of know. And be very mindful of all these little things that are visible and invisible that people pick up, that there are different rules, because that doesn't go down well. And what it can do is it can erode where you have really good relationships with your people. So do not underestimate the impact that bringing a family or friend into the business has. Be aware of how it looks, the perception, not even necessarily the reality, but be aware of the perception that others might have. And they will look to you to reinforce whatever those boundaries are, but they will also look at the individual that you have brought in, because they also reflect on who you are as a character and your reputation and how trustworthy you are. Where possible, separate home from work. Now, this will depend on the relationship, who it is that you've brought in. If you live together, that will be more of a challenge, especially if you live together and traditionally you have discussed things around the kitchen table. Be mindful of those lines. And again, this all comes down to, is the person, can you trust them? And it can be more of a challenge, say if it's somebody who is learning about the place of work and maybe they're learning where those lines are and where the blurry bits are. But this is where you might need to have extra conversations with them outside of work in your home to go, I am discussing this in front of you, but you cannot allow, this is why you cannot discuss this, you cannot do this. You're setting those boundaries as to what you can discuss with them. But be super, super careful if you're discussing other employees in front of that individual, because whether they like it or not, that will show in how that particular family member or friend then treats that individual or their approach, and they won't even realize they're doing it, because they will then have access to this other information that they really shouldn't have, and they won't be able to help themselves in some way. It might not be immediately obvious, it might be obvious, but be super, super careful. Because also, it's not just those workplace relationships. You're also wanting to preserve that personal relationship. And this then takes me to my final point, is knowing when it's not working. If you're not prepared to fire the person, you're in no way prepared to hire them. Let that sink in. Could you dismiss that family or friend and it not ruin that personal relationship and it not have a really negative impact on your other interdependent relationships? You will be treating them the same as you treat any other employee. So you will be taking them through, if things aren't working out, you would explore why. They will have the same in terms of whether they're their probationary period or whatever processes that you have, they will follow the same processes. So if they are not working out, if it hasn't clicked with them that they have to work twice as hard to prove that they are worthy of getting a job with you and it's not just nepotism, then yeah, you're going to face problems. If they don't put the work in, they're going to face exactly the same repercussions as any other employee. How is that going to impact on your personal relationship with them? How are you going to handle that? And how are you going to handle conflict between that family member or friend and another employee who isn't that family member or friend? How do you propose to handle any conflicts or clashes that probably will arise at some point? And how are you going to do it in a way that comes across as fair? That you're not favouring your family member or friend over the other employee and making it clear, while you then have to realise that there are then the personal repercussions of that. Ask yourself these things first before you either give in to pressure or before you decide to give them a go. If you're not prepared for that, you're not prepared to hire them. And how quickly are you going to act when you realise that things maybe aren't working out, or something needs tweaked, something needs changed? Because the longer you leave it, the worse it will get. And the thing is, it's not just in the workplace, it is going to impact personally. I know I'm repeating myself, but this is why it matters. I have seen where people have brought somebody into their business, where in some circumstances they've brought a spouse in, haven't formalised the arrangement, have given them more authority than really what they intended, and then that relationship breaks down and it impacts on the whole business, and they lose employees because of all of that, and the business nearly has to shut down. Do not underestimate this. And I have seen where businesses have brought in cousins because somebody put pressure on them to, and that cousin has then created all sorts of problems because they have thought, because I'm the cousin and the owners are my cousins, I can pretty much do what I want because they're not going to fire me because my Aunt Joan is going to give them hell. Be aware of this. These are the real situations, and there's so many more, but these are just the highlights. So I urge you to be mindful, to be aware, and to be conscious and intentional if you hire family or friend. You need to decide, is it worth it? Or are we better just staying family and friends? And if there is a falling out and you don't side with that family member or friend, will they see it as a betrayal of your relationship? How are you going to deal with that? Look, friends and family can be a huge asset because what they can bring that not a lot of others bring is that connected loyalty. There's more of a bond, but that's no guarantee that they will have your best interests at heart. So this is where your clarity and putting those boundaries in place is super, super important. So if you're already working with somebody close, or you're considering bringing somebody, a friend or family member on board, have a think about the kind of tips, or which one of these are you going to do first? Are you going to be a bit more cautious than you were? A bit less, oh, bring them in, I know them, they'll be fine, they're a good worker. Unless you've employed them before, you have no idea what kind of employee they will be. And if you know other people who've hired family or friends, have a think about what worked and what didn't work. Share in the comments below or pop to the website and connect with me on there. And let's have a chat. See you next time.